You're trying to make things perfect. And why are you trying to make things perfect in a retail environment where we know within 24 hours, things are going to change?
But we are notorious for fire drills. All
Yes. But when we start to over-index on that and we start to leave the people out and start to dehumanize them and just see them as someone who's actually just needs to get these things done, they're a tool, they're an instrument.
I was told once that doing everything will not help your career or your health.
Is that you have to give the situation what it calls for, no more, no less. That takes time, that takes experience. And when you're able to do that, you're not emotionally connected to that situation.
Welcome to Blade to Greatness, the podcast where retail leaders sharpen their edge, one executive skill at a time, as we uncover the essential traits every retail leader needs to thrive. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
And I'm Casey Golden. Each episode, we're joined by a guest who brings one transformative leadership skill into focus. And today, we're joined again by Steve Worthy to explore his upcoming book, Simplify to Lead. Steve introduces us to the trapped framework and the subtle but dangerous patterns that even the strongest leaders fall into, from perfectionism and people-pleasing to avoiding tough conversations.
But Steve doesn't just identify the traps, he shows leaders how to break free by embracing simplicity without lowering standards. Through his pillars of simplicity, he helps leaders express real opinions, handle criticism with clarity, and define the right problems before rushing to solutions.
And Steve's credibility here is unmatched, right along with his energy. As founder and CEO of Worthy Retail Global, he's built a reputation for teaching leaders how to slow down their thinking so they can speed up their results. His work through the campus and the Forge Accelerator proves that clarity always beats chaos.
I'm really excited to dig into how leaders can move from trapped leadership to clear, confident decisions and why simplicity is the key to conviction.
Now, before we dive in, just a quick ask for you, our listeners. If you like the show, why not give us a 5-star rating and review and drop a quick review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or Good Pods. Your support means everything.
And also, why not check out the other shows in our Retail Razor podcast network? The original, The Retail Razor Show, plus Retail Transformers and Data Blades. You can find them in your favorite podcast player or visit our YouTube channel to find them all. Now let's jump in. Here's our latest conversation with Steve Worthy.
Steve, welcome back to the Blade to Greatness podcast.
Excited to be here. I'm excited to be here. I wish people had an opportunity to hear some of our conversations before we recorded, but that's okay.
Maybe in the outtake reel someday.
I think this is going to be really good, but man, the pre-recording was awesome. Everybody, just to let you know.
You're not the first one to mention that, so maybe we should just go live.
Yeah, one of these days we'll do a live one and see how that goes. But it is a thrill to have you back on the show. And today you are coming to talk about something that's actually, I think, from your upcoming book, Simplify to Lead, right? Why most leaders are doing too much. And just as the title, I think, implies, leaders really do need to simplify what they're doing often, right, to be successful. So they need to avoid falling into traps, as you define them in the book, that hinder their progress and overall ability to simplify. So we're saying simplify a lot. So there's obviously something implied there, but it's challenging, right? So tell us more of how you actually make this happen.
Yeah, no, thanks for talking to me about this topic. I think it came out of just years of coaching leaders, of dealing with different leaders at certain levels, certain organizations, different cultures within the retail space, right? Every retailer has their own culture and way of doing things. But one of the things that I saw was very present and consistent was when you see a lot of leaders start to over-index in certain areas, whether it is, we start talking about it from our trap framework, whether it is task over people, it is their inability to identify that they have rigid ideologies about how they see things, about how they need to do things, right? Or excessive overthinking. These are things that, as retail leaders, I've seen consistently across the board. Now, when you look at them at the face value, you would think that, okay, they're not that big of a deal when you think about task over people, because guess what? Stuff still has to get done. Things still have to get done. But what tends to happen in that the T for trapped is that when you start to over-index and start to place the task and the projects over people and not understanding the role that people play within the completion of that process or that task or that initiative, that's where we start to see leaders fall apart. We understand it. We understand that things need to get done. Within the retail space, those are the areas that we start to see things that need to get executed on. But when we start to over-index on that and we start to leave the people out and start to dehumanize them and just see them as someone who's actually just needs to get these things done, they're a tool, they're an instrument, that's when leaders fall into trouble. Those are that's one of the areas that I've seen leaders sort of throughout the course of retail start to over-index on, is that task over people.
And it's so easy in retail, because there is so much that gets done across a web of ops, regardless of what your job title is. But we are notorious for fire drills.
Yes.
It's a fire drill after a fire drill. As soon as you get a fire put out, and it's just like, great, it's 7:30. I can go ahead and do my day's worth of work. Because you've been putting fire drills out all day. It's like you don't even get to work until like after business hours. And I think it's just very common that you can get over-indexed without even thinking about it.
Yeah. And here's the part that is so frustrating for me sometimes, is that a lot of leaders will wear that as a badge of honor. Almost in the context of like, I am the executor. I am going to get this done. And we see it often in coaching sessions where they become passed over in certain roles because they are a doer and because they're an executor. And part of that is, how do you help these leaders make that transition from being a task-oriented leader, understanding where and managing people and processes, to moving them into a more strategic mindset, where from a strategic mindset, that involves people, that involves the ideas and asking better questions of people, that involves you understanding the different nuances of your leaders and how they actually like to get communicated with, or what they're really good at. That's the transition. And so when I hear a lot of leaders say, I get passed over, and we have these conversations, I see that, man, you are a task-oriented person. And so they're looking for a more strategic leader. So how do we help leaders slide down that continuum, if you will, of growth from a strategic mindset to less of a doer mindset?
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Like out loud.
Yeah.
I was told once that doing everything will not help your career or your health.
Very much.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You can't be the person everybody goes to and wear that as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
I was one of those people. Anything was going wrong, I got it.
Yeah.
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 And I think the culture of retail, once again, it is something that is evolving. And I think it almost becomes, you become an anomaly when you start to think outside of that way of like me just being the person that's going to do everything. So I think we're starting to see some progress, but more has to be made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that that's one of the biggest trap that strong leaders fall into, or is there something else?
Oh, I think that's one of the biggest ones. But
yeah.
I think one of the other ones that I want to talk about is and it's almost kind of goes part and parcel with that, is the rigid ideologies that leaders tend to have around how to do things and how they see things. And here's the story. Here's the thing that I see all the time, is that I had a great leader. I loved what he used to say. And so I'm taking on that same mantra. I love how he used to talk to people. I love how he used to get things done and all these different things. And it's okay to have idols, if you will, as a leader growing up, right? I have Jim Hogan, God rest his soul, one of the best leaders I've ever had. But one of the things that tends to happen is that we start to develop these ways of seeing things and doing things that we continue to feel are healthy because they've gotten us results previously. They've provided opportunities for us to get promoted previously. We've gotten accolades from leaders previously around how we see and do things. But that rigid ideology, when it comes up against a culture or it comes up against a team that needs to change and grow, and you haven't grown with it, oh my gosh. Quick story. I had a leader, and this is in the book. I had a leader who was amazing, ready to go to the next level, all these different things. And through the course of our relationship, she got to the point where she was ready to go to the next level. And I came into work and I had an email. She actually was putting in her 2-week notice. And I said, why are you leaving? I want to go do something else, Steve. I want to go do X, Y, and Z. And the long story of this lesson out of that story was the fact that I wasn't equipped enough to take her to the next level. I didn't realize that until after she left. I didn't make that the connection, the fact that she needed more in order for her to grow as a leader. I had capped out as a leader. I wasn't giving any more to myself. I wasn't developing myself at that point in time. My communication style was stagnant, and therefore I was not able to give her what she needed, so she left. And so what we see, and this kind of goes back to where I talk about you have to change before it's necessary, because if I would have identified that I had certain gaps, I could have worked on those things and then provided those things for her. But we see that in a lot of leaders, a rigid ideology of seeing and doing things, it will hinder you and it'll hinder your team's growth.
Oh, that's a great example. So if you're trying to avoid that kind of a trap, I mean, I'm just thinking that one of the things you probably have to balance, right, is how do you get to that simplification you're talking about, but without actually lowering your standards at the same time, right? Because you still want to have, I'm going to assume you tell everyone, you still want to have the high standard that you're hoping to elevate everyone else to, while still trying to simplify. So it seems like that's got to be a difficult balance to strike.
Yeah, and I think the best way to do that is approachability. It's 100% around approachability. It's a lost art. It's something that we don't talk a lot about anymore. And we use a framework. It's called the SMILE framework. So the S is for self-awareness. The M is for mindful listening. The I is for inspires trust. The L is for lead by example, and the E is for effective empathy. And so we sort of say this, that every leader smiles differently, right? So we want to make sure that this is not, while it's a framework, every leader will look at each one of them differently, and they will throttle up or down based on who they are. But the main one, and the first one, is around self-awareness. And we talk about that, we've spoken about this for years, right? Decades around self-awareness. But for me, it's not about the strengths and weaknesses of the person or who you are. It's about the why. Like, why do you get upset when Ricardo comes into the room? Why do you get upset when you're on a call and Ricardo starts to speak? What is it about Ricardo? What is it about you that you feel a certain way about individuals? How do you, as a leader, self-awareness, truly understand like who you are and how you show up, and what are the different triggers that will make you become successful or make you not successful? So that self-awareness piece is so important. The one area that I think a lot of leaders struggle within self-awareness is that they over-index into providing what a situation actually needs. They will over-communicate. They will over-try to deliver. This is the mindset of the retail leader, right? We just talked about task over people. We will try to give more and more and more. And by doing that, we start to devalue who we are and the communication and conversation that we're having. I always talk about in this context is that you have to give the situation what it calls for, no more, no less. That takes time, that takes experience. And when you're able to do that, you're not emotionally connected to that situation. We've all seen it. All of us have seen those meetings where someone gets bent out of shape about a certain thing because they're emotionally tied to a decision that they want to get across. Guess what? That person carries that emotion throughout the course of the day. We see it. We see it. We see it at lunch. We see it, when we walk past their cubicle or we walk past their office, and they're still upset about it, right? But you, as a leader, you have left that conversation and emotionally disconnected, and now you're able to move on to the next thing. So I feel that when we start talking about approachability is really understanding who you are and how you're going to show up in a certain situation.
Yeah, that's a good example. I like that. That's a great approach. So let me ask you one other one that always strikes me as something that's a bit of a challenge here. When you see leaders strive for what I'm going to call maybe an excessive amount of perfectionism.
Yeah.
How do you avoid that trap?
I think perfectionism is rooted in sort of look at me, look at how I'm doing things. How am I able to do this in such a way that's going to be so perfect for everybody, and everybody's going to want to know how to do it? I almost feel that the perfectionism almost ties into a lack of self-awareness. It's because you are starting to provide, once again, more and more information. You're over-indexing, you're over-providing, you're trying to make things perfect. And why are you trying to make things perfect in a retail environment where we know within 24 hours things are going to change, right? So how are you actually going to, this perfect end cap or perfect process or whatever it may be? Listen to me. With an email, those things can be dismantled. So I think when we start talking about perfectionism, I think it's important for leaders to understand the inner workings of why they make a decision the way that they do, and why do they feel that it actually has to be perfect per se, and what's their definition of perfect? How do they learn how to throttle their emotional connection to an operation, even to people within that operation? Because I think part of it is, how do we, if we feel that the situation needs to be perfect, we start to think that people around us need to be perfect as well. And we start to analyze them at a deeper level. Oh my gosh, I don't know why this person said this. I don't know why they implemented it that way. And we start to get into this blaming culture. And so I think perfectionism is rooted in the lack of self-awareness. So how do we help people and leaders become more self-aware so that they can understand it's not about being perfect. It's actually about execution, and how do you bring people along for the ride?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Steve, this has been another nearly perfect discussion on another really insightful topic. I've no doubt that our listeners and leaders who are listening can put some of these ideas into practice right away. I thank you so much for highlighting such an important topic.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Steve, you bring such a refreshing perspective. I'm loving these conversations. I think we still got one more left, so let's wrap this one up. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods. And don't forget to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'm Casey Golden.
We'd love to hear from you. Follow us and share your feedback at Retail Razor on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. You can also subscribe to our Substack newsletter for highlights from every episode, and visit retailrazor.com for transcripts and more details about our amazing guests. Blade to Greatness is part of the Retail Razor Podcast Network. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, stay sharp, lead boldly, and stay human. This is the Retail Razor Blade to Greatness.